Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com, and the public test server 7.2 for the Elder Scrolls Online Deadlands has been released, and we're going to go through these patch notes. There is no possible way to do it too long, didn't read. This is a lot of stuff in here. Big changes, especially you Stamina Dragonites. So I'm going to go through this and kind of highlight what I took away as the biggest changes. This will not be all inclusive. I will include a link to these PTS patch notes in case you want to read them in description. We're going to walk through this. Keep in mind, these changes are not final. These are proposed, and the DLC is going to be months away from coming out. Something also that happened today, in case you're interested, is Hrothgar's got nerfed from 26% total resistances down to 13. Not associated with this, but it's important to note. Now with the Deadlands DLC, this previous one was released in September, so we can reasonably assume probably about 3 months from that would be when this release. I'm just guessing though. We got a ways to go in testing this thing and getting ready for it, but it's going to add a bunch of different stuff, and it kind of talks about here in the introduction what that is. The base game is going to include the Armory System. Really important part, it is the base game. Also, there's going to be 3 new Mythics, Overland Sets, and Craftable Sets. Not to mention Nvidia DLSS and DLAA, so them graphics going to be looking good. Curated item set drops, talked a little bit about that, but just making it more easy for RNG in dungeons and trials and arenas. And some massive changes to proc sets, itemizations that are currently in the game, and crit hit damage being capped as well. So the first thing that stuck out to me in the Deadlands DLC game pack here is talking about the new Deadlands zones, and you can essentially get to this via the story, a section in the collections UI. It talks about the Deadlands zones, starting new story, 2 new delves, 2 new powerful war boss, and what really stuck out to me is new wandering executioner boss that gives you the ultimate challenge. We have 3 new craftable sets, Wretched Vitality. While in combat, applying a major buff or debuff to a target grants you magic and stamina recovery, 260 for 15 seconds. Also while in combat, applying a minor buff or debuff grants you 130 magic and stamina recovery for 15 seconds. So just reading this tooltip, it seems like there's no cooldown, and you can stack both major and minor buffs or debuffs in order to get this effect. I mean, you could just use pierced armor and basically get both those going and have 100% uptime. So this seems like a really strong, craftable, out the gate set if you struggle with sustain, especially for new players that have some ability that can do both of these things in one. Deadlands Demolisher is up next, and this is kind of a goofy set. I really don't understand it, but your bash attacks deal 935 more damage. When you bash, you deal physical damage in a cone in front of you, interrupting any enemy hit. This effect can occur every 2 seconds and counts as bash damage. So I don't know if they're trying to bring back bash necros, but the fact that it's a cone in front of you and it can have multiple interrupts might be helpful for some new tank. They have also changed how bash functions, which we'll get to a little bit more. Really good stuff for tanks. Iron Flask, a craftable set, really excited about. When you drink a potion while in combat, reduces your damage taken by 12% for 20 seconds. This is like the Clever Alchemist defensive. And I imagine just a really cool setup you could have is 4 pieces on the body plus a shield on your back bar, and then 3 jewelry, 1 piece on your body, and a sword on your back bar, running Iron Flask and Clever Alchemist. So when you pop a potion, you have both your burst window and your defensives all in one go. It would be kind of an interesting setup, and the fact that this is craftable, really good stuff. It doesn't say what traits you need or how many traits, so I don't have that information on me. Overland, and our first one up is Eye of the Grasp Light. When you deal critical damage, generate 7 ultimate, and it can occur every 5 seconds. This doesn't seem that powerful comparatively to other things. I'm not a math nerd, y'all know this, but can't imagine running this over Bahase, Sororia, Burning Spellweave, Scathing Age, Mother Sorrow, and the like. Axrose Ward, dealing crit damage with a direct damage ability, grants you a damage shield that absorbs 8,177 damage for 6 seconds and has a 6-second cooldown. What I would imagine people using this would be like something like Stampede for 2-hander, guaranteeing a crit and proccing this shield up at all times. So it's like an Ice Heart for stamina per se with the 5-piece. I don't know how much I would use it, but it has some utility. Then we got this funky name here with Cruelty Heavy set. Heavy, keep that in mind. When you deal direct damage, you apply 1 of 5 random major debuffs. What does this sound like? It's Daedric Trickery's counter. To enemies within 8 meters of you for 18 seconds. This effect can occur every 8 seconds and only if an enemy is in range. Eligible debuffs are Major Breach, Major Cowardice, Major Defile, Major Maim, Major Vulnerability, increasing damage. That is a really powerful one that stuck out to me, making this set pretty much a good staple and something you're going to want to collect if you're into PvP at least. And it kind of goes over new achievements, new titles, new motifs, new furnishing, and new houses. So you housers out there, Swanker, talking about you, you're going to love this. And since we're talking about gear, I'm going to skip ahead and talk about the Mythics. So there's 3 new Mythics. One is a ring, gains 100 weapon and spell damage and 1,157 armor for each 3 set bonus active on the wearer. I thought this was an odd set that you would reward you wearing something like agility, endurance, willpower, continence, ancient grace, some of these. But the fact that it comes in a ring seems a little bit lackluster, being that you kind of have to wear one of these rings in order to get a lot of the 3-piece stacks up. Next Mythics up is another hard to say name, Ban. Increases the damage of your light attacks by 1185. That's a lot more light attack damage. And yes, another proc set. When you deal damage with consecutive melee light attacks, gain a stack of temper for 10 seconds up to 5 stacks. When you perform a fully charged heavy attack, you consume this temper and deal physical damage per stack to enemies in a line after a 1-second delay, stunning them for 3 seconds if 5 stacks are consumed. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds and scales off of your higher of weapon or spell damage. What do I think this would be used for? In PvE, I don't know what this physical damage stack and how hard it's going to hit will actually look like, but the light attack right here of 1,185, that's a lot. Now, how I would see this, just reading the tooltip, what it would be used for is a Stam Nightblade. Just basically light attack weaving in between, getting 5 stacks, hitting cloak, fully charged heavy attack, boom, a second later, everyone just basically gets nuked. So it seems like a very strong one-piece proc set, though I don't know if it's going to have a lot of PvE application, but PvP, you bet, people are going to be using this. Altar of Ruin, activating crouch toggles on and off a 12-meter Aura of Pride. Up to 6 allies in the Aura gain 260 weapon and spell damage, but reducing your weapon and spell damage by 130 for every group member benefiting from this Aura of Pride. I absolutely love this. I think this is really cool that you can toggle it on and off via crouch, and I imagine you're going to see this mechanic in future gear sets going forward. Really interesting. You'll notice the 12-meter radius is a little bit lackluster. Think of Encratus Behemoth in PvE. 6 allies, so I guess they're suspecting that both tanks will run this in a trial, and that 260 weapon and spell damage will stack on things like Powerful Assault and Major and Minor Courage. So I can see this being used for PvE tanking, and I'm going to collect this right away. Love this item. Those are the new gears and bells and whistles. We're going to switch gears, see what I did there, and talk about the Armory System, which is a part of the base game. The Armory System, we're reading it here, and it allows you to save any of your custom character builds, remembering your gear, attributes, abilities, champion points, and even if you're a werewolf or vampire. So you can swap this effortlessly, especially on consoles. This is fantastic. And I've heard a lot of criticisms about this in comparison to the dressing room add-on in PC, but the fact that you can save abilities, specifically morphs and champion point, because when I want to go from a PvE damage dealer to, let's say, a PvE tank, I can do it on one character. The way I handle this right now is essentially I have 18 different characters. So I got a Stamplar PvE DPS, I got a Stamplar PvP character, I got a Magpar healer, I got a Magpar PvE DPS. This will basically allow me to play my main, my Magic Templar, and swap from basically anything I want. I'm really excited about this. Armory is free to all players, and you can obtain it in the Crown Store. And there's this assistant, I can't even pronounce the name, separate purchase to access this Armory outside of your home. Thing about the Armory and this assistant, though, it seems kind of skeptical that you can't necessarily use it in some of the places you would normally use, like a banker and a merchant. They talked about you essentially can't use it in a trial, VMA, and some of these other things. So I will probably get it for myself just because it's convenient, but I'm like, well, how often am I going to use it if I can't pull it out like my banker frequently? And I would imagine dressing room is still going to be used on PC because you can swap from trash pulls to DPS to boss and like with the click of a button. Downside, there's no Mundus application here. So that's going to be a downside if you're swapping Munduses frequently. That's a little bit different. Plus, you can get a lot of those things in your home if you have the crowns for it, making it simple for people that play a lot of builds like me. Curated item set drops. This is the RNG change that we're really excited about. Bosses and reward chests from arenas and incursions will now preferentially Drop set items that you have not unlocked in your collections. Dungeon encounter and monster leads Zos Finn said incursions include dark anchors, abysmal geysers, dragons, horrorstones, and oblivion portals. So it's not just dungeons, it's these things here, but you'll notice there's no rewards of the worthy and so forth. So it goes on to further elaborate on this. Most bosses in the game, along with the rewards chests with arenas and incursions, will now preferentially drop item sets that have not been unlocked in your collections. The way to acquire particular items are unchanged, but it should make it much easier to find items that have not been unlocked. An item looted from treasure chest containers or from non-boss monsters are generally not curated in this manner. So it's not going to completely delete all of RNG. You're still going to have to work for gear, so it's just going to make it a lot easier if you do Vulture Maelstrom Arena 700 times looking for one item, and I cannot wait for this in the Armory. These two quality of life features, I can't explain enough. It allows me to play the game and do the things I want. I'm trying not to be a homer here, but I get tired of farming Medusa's Arx Corinium for 700 times when I just want a stinking staff so I can go do VMA or go do Dreadseller hard modes on my DPS. This will unlock the fun factor of Elder Scrolls Online. It'll make you get in the fight a lot more and do the things you want. This is huge for me. Kind of talking about they had changed the collection summary UI, so different user interface, which I'll show in other videos. Console folks out there, map update. Included update 32, active dark anchors and sky shards will now appear on your mini-map. It'll kind of a display like Horror-Storms or Abysmal Geysers, making it so much easier for you to get this. No, there's no mini-map, but this is something in the right direction. I talked about Nvidia DLSS and DLAA. Too long didn't read. Multi-threading rendering, and this is going to make the game look prettier. I don't play Elder Scrolls Online for the looking of it pretty. I would rather go play a single-player MMO, but they are pushing the technology forward. I just wish that the servers would perform well in Cyrodiil. I would rather have a lot less shiny and pretty game and have a Cyrodiil work, but again, they're trying to push the technology forward and get the most out of this game. Buckle up. We are to the combat changes, and above this there's a lot of dungeon tuning and so forth, but this is the kind of the major deal you're going to want to know about. Number one is critical damage and healing now has a hard cap of 125%. This is crit damage and crit healing. This is not critical chance, because I see people in the comments keep making this mistake. Crit damage, which you can find out what yours is in the advanced stats as your character screen. Note that this value can go beyond 125, but your crit strikes will not deal more than 125 damage or healing in total. The too long didn't read here with this writing is crit chances. Crit chance continues to remain the best stat in the game. But they wanted to tone down the crit damage so that it wasn't the only secondary stat you would go after, giving it a cap like other games. Some games had a soft and a hard cap. This is a hard cap of 125, and there's no reason to go beyond it. There's people that can get 200% crit damage with a bunch of various different things. Shadow Munda Stone, Backstabber, Champion Point passive, Khajiit, Nightblade. There's a whole bunch of things that amplify this, but for the average player, gang, this really isn't going to be night and day difference for you. You're probably not even going to notice it unless you're in hardcore PvE trials and you're doing 120,000 DPS and you're God's gift to the game. The vast majority of us, including myself, you're going to look at this under the advanced stat, but we're going to find gear sets and combinations that don't put you above this cap and go for a wasted stat. So I would say relax in general. It's going to be a good change probably overall for the game and affect very little of us. Next change up was kind of interesting, adjustments to bash. This is actually fascinating. Didn't see this coming, but the core combat skill has been reduced 333 milliseconds down from 350. So essentially now you can cast it 3 times in a second. Why that's useful is if you're tanking out there, you'll know that sometimes you go for a bash and there's just so many mobs around that you can't necessarily target the right ones. You have to recast it quickly. Speaking of that, they reduced the cost down significantly from 1889 to 765. So you can actually use this as a main spammable, and even as a damage dealer. And hardcore PvPers out there will know that you can actually tap in a bash really quick in between your attacks and or bar swapping to get a little bit extra damage. And they reduced the cooldown phase after activating the bash that prevents you from casting other active abilities from 700 milliseconds down to 333. Again, very high skill level if you're going to use this in PvP, but for the average tank out there, you gotta bash. That's the number one thing as a tank. Whole block, Don't let go of your block. Taunt the main boss and bash that thing when you see the little things about their head. There's tons of other changes, but these are just the juggernaut ones. And Dragonknight, oh my god, if you've been waiting for Dragonknight updates and buffs, you got it. Dragonknight Combustion. This is a resource sustaining passive in Ardent Flame. Increase the resource granted from this passive to 500 and 1000 stamina or magicka, up from 250 and 500. Added a cooldown of 500 milliseconds to each, which are separately tracked from one another to make up for the above increase in the massive buff with the charge trait. Charge weapon traits getting a buff, and this right here is massive in terms of sustaining on a Dragonknight. Another huge massive change is Inferno. This ability and Carterize now both grant major prophecy and savagery, essentially spell and weapon crit. So you want to slot them typically for specific builds, but now it's pretty universal. One heals you really good, one does a great damage over time. Flames of Oblivion. This morph now launches 3 fireballs, up from 2 since it's lost part of its unique morph function. So both Carterize and Flames of Oblivion both got a big nasty buff, and that's going to be a great skill that pretty much every Dragonknight uses already. Lava Whip. You wanted a Stam Whip. You wanted a Stam Whip. This ability and morph now scale off your highest offensive stat rather than exclusively magic-based stats. May this finally end the fury and age-old debate over Stam Whip. Oh wow, that's a huge change in and of itself. And it talks about fixing an issue with off balance, and then the override ability Power Lash is essentially the double whip when something's off balance to give you a heal. Now heals immediately, but they tone down the heal, so it'll be a double whip. However, Power Lash no longer has a 3 seconds cooldown, so you can just ballerina whip if you want. Molten Whip. This is a huge change for PvP, and you're gonna probably use this as your main spammable as a Dragonknight, Stam Dragonknight, PvE and PvP. Seething Fury now has a 10-second per stack increase, up from 5 seconds. So what happens is you're using Ardent Flame abilities and you get 3 stacks for a really big nasty whip, but you kind of want to set that up in PvP. So this is going to give you more time to do that, to time your burst window and really hit that whip when you exactly want it. Just incredible. High skill cap level with this. Love this. We're not done. World and Ruin. This passive now increases your damage done with flame and poisons by 2 and 5% rather than increasing your damage with area of effect flame attacks by 3 and 6. And reduces the cost of your poison ability by 12 and 25%. Talk about the reasoning for doing this, and this is really just a PvE damage output adjustment. Another little buff here is Ash Cloud. This ability's morphs now cost 378 magic every second while activated, rather than having a massive upfront cost. This ability now ticks 15 times over its duration, down from 16, while their total damage or healing per cast remains relatively the same. Talks about the Eruption morph. This morph's initial hit damage now has a 10-second cooldown to prevent it from turning into incredibly low-cost AoE spammable. In Battle Roar, another sustained passive, which is the staple of Dragonknights, got buffed. This passive now restores 25 and 50 health, magic, and stamina per ultimate consumed, rather than 2346. So another further boost to sustain in Dragonknight. If we just think about that for a second, Stam Whip, huge resource sustain. I got more time to cast my Molten Whip in PvP when I need it. I mean, this is just incredible passives and changes for the Dragonknight. Really excited. Necromancer Boneyard increased the damage of this ability and its morphs by 10% per tick, since they tick 10 times instead of 11 after update 30. Now Nightblade got changed. Grim Focus. This ability in its morph now grants 1% damage done per stack rather than 2% crit damage and healing. Reason being, it makes sense that they would do that, considering that basically you could get to that crit cap, that crit damage cap, and this thing would be kind of garbo. So they changed it so you'd still get some benefit from running Grim Focus. Another interesting one for the Nightblade, Twisting Path, which is kind of primarily used for magic DPS. This ability now scales dynamically with your highest offensive stat. So you could essentially see it as a Stam damage over time. Let me go through here some little fixes, talking about the Templar Backlash, visual change. I read Restoring Light and I almost got triggered when it said Cleansing Ritual. I'm like, no, don't nerf my ritual, but just some coefficient scaling, which I don't know what that means. Gordon, Emerald Moss fixed an issue with the morphs of the healing seeds, and a big one for Vampire that you hardcore PvE cheesers out there using Mistform. This ability in this morph damage reduction now only works against player attacks rather than, you know, PvE encounters. So if you didn't know this, people were essentially sitting in Mistform, including myself for Dreadseller hard mode when I was learning it. Vampire, so you'd have just basically tons of damage reduction and pretty much couldn't die while you're in stage 3. So they're kind of doing this so that way you would still have to deal with some of these hard damage mechanics. Like Pain Refuge got a little nerf. The star now reduces your damage by 2% for every 2 negative effects rather than 1%. Still has a 20% cap. If you don't know, it's one of the strongest red champion point PvP nodes out there. Huge one here. The following rule set will now be followed with item sets when applicable and has applied to all existing sets. If a set grants weapon, now it grants spell damage. If it grants physical, now it grants spell pen. If it grants weapon, now it grants spell critical. So those sets across the board, you're going to have universal sets. Like you could run essentially, just reading this, Medusas, which is a heavy armor magic based set primarily it was. Well, now you could run jewelry and daggers and have a really good stamina setup with it. And there's a whole bunch of other ones that you could think about in running, but this really opens it up for hybridization. And we're gonna still find out what's the best weapon gear combination, probably use the same exact 2 or 3 setups. But for folks that like the hybrid and using different sets, this will really open the door for theory crafting. Now, this is a lot. I'm not going to go through this and list entirely or we'll be here all night. Item sets that scale off of weapon damage, spell damage, max mag, max stamina can now critically strike. Item sets that scale in order of magnitude or based on additional modifiers such as Reliquens or Zon will not critically strike. Many of these sets have received adjustments to their powers as well. Below are the sets that can critically strike and had their scaling values reduced by 5%. So essentially they went through and kind of itemized which sets they wanted to crit or not, and then kind of toned some down if it was appropriate or left some out if they were just overtuned. I'm just gonna scroll through arena weapon here. Look, reduces the damage by approximately 28% for Frenzy. This is the back bar Batishram weapon that every single person was running. You can see now it grants 30 weapon damage and spell damage up to 10 times rather than 38 weapon damage up to 5 times. So it grants both. I'm not going to go over all of them here, but okay, now it talks about the proc set adjustment, and essentially that the item sets that deal a burst of damage within 4 seconds or less now have a 1 second window after procking. Basically, you're running 3 proc sets, you hold down a heavy attack or use an ability, they all land in a second or within less than a second. Now you're going to have to do it just either wear 1 or time it a little bit differently depending on, but I imagine people are still going to use proc sets. They're just going to use 1 instead of stacking 3 of them. An item trait change, they changed the charge trait, increased the potency of this up to 480% to ensure it's more competitive with other traits in terms of effectiveness. Fact about this is being engaged by mainly Dragonites. They want some diversity in getting the most out of that trait, and if a trait is charged and is happening more frequently, you could see it being a really good trait. Now, a huge one, again, we're not going through all of them, but PvPers out there are going to want to know about mechanical acuity, and this thing got pretty nerfed. Item now grants a stack of mechanical acuity for 4 seconds whenever you deal non-critical damage, granting you 20% critical chance per stack up to every half seconds. After this effect ends or reaches 5 stacks, it cannot occur again for 25 seconds. Essentially, mechanical acuity provided just crazy bursts with exactly what you wanted in a short PvP window with no downside. And the fact that you could front bar it only without really having to do anything and just go to your front bar and absolutely kill someone with an ultimate, it's a big change, especially now that procs can crit. We saw this coming, probably needed, but yeah, you might not want to go without mechanical acuity on live server. And Dark Convergence got nerfed. Yeah, reduce this set's damage by approximately 59%, but increase the scaling per target up to 50%, up from 10. So this is exactly what they needed to do when it launched and what I told them to do, but no one listens to Deltia. You want to make it like Proxy Det. If you don't want to Proxy Det to kill one person solo. You need Proxy Det to do what it's supposed to. 10 people standing on the flag, not paying attention, delete them. Same thing with Dark Convergence. I don't mind Dark Convergence damage. I mind it against a solo player. I shouldn't be able to kill someone in a duel with the Dark Convergence. Now they reduced the radius down for 12 meters to 10. That's okay. And then the set now pulls once after this array rather than twice over restoration. Thank God. The triple CC, the snare, the pull, then the CC. it's just too much. It will now pull all nearby targets rather than 6 per pull, so it remains effective against large groups. This is really good. It's supposed to be doing what it's supposed to do. Blow up large groups that are stacking and whacking. And then they nerfed Deadly Strikes again, a Stamplar set. Reduced the set bonus damage from 18 down to 15, so that's a little bit frustrating for Stamplars out there. Mantle of Sororia. This set now only procs off of light and heavy attacks rather than any source of single target direct damage. And I'm exhausted after going over all these changes. I was very skeptical the week before, but to be honest with you, in summary, I'm really excited about this change and update. I think PvP will take a good balance in the right direction. We'll find some cheesy proc set to still use and tune up, but Mechanical Acuity, Hrothgar, Dark Convergence, and then the crit damage cap, I think is a strong thing in PvP, making it much more playable. In PvE, the way I'm taking it is it's going to be much easier to collect the gear, and for the vast majority of the crit damage thing is really not going to affect us. It's the top tier players, and they already know what else to wear and what else to use. So as a damage dealer, you're going to still stack a ton of weapon or spell critical. You're going to have a lot more access to different gear sets for your magic or stam, throwing in those unique combinations. So hybridization gonna go really well. Not to mention the RNG changes, fantastic, and the Armory, fantastic. Is it a perfect update? No. I would still like Cyrodiil to work and so I could live in there, but it is what it is. They're doing it in the right direction. I love this to close out the year. Huge quality of life, and I'm really excited about the Deadlands. I'll be streaming on Twitch, so twitch.tv/Deltiasgaming is where I stream 4 days during the work week, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope to see you there, and thanks for watching.